Get out of here! You filthy creature! You'll never amount to anything in life with that cheap little suitcase of yours!
Le Destin, the journey of a dream, a black man's rise to justice. Elijah woke up each day with the sun barely peeking through the blinds of his cramped apartment in Harlem. The world outside was noisy and chaotic, but Elijah had long since learned to block out the distractions. His world was smaller, quieter, and shaped by determination, ambition, and the constant reminder of where he had come from. His bed was small, the sheets old and frayed, but it was his. Everything in his life was small, frayed, and worn, but it was his. The air was always thick with the scent of oil and concrete, and the streets buzzed with the sounds of life, constant, unrelenting life. Elijah had grown up here, surrounded by the concrete jungle of Harlem, where dreams were often stomped out before they even had the chance to sprout. But he dreamed. His dreams were big, bigger than the small space he lived in, bigger than the poor neighborhood he came from, and bigger than the prejudice that loomed over him as a black man. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, Elijah would make a cup of instant coffee, grab his ragged briefcase, and head out the door to work. His briefcase was old and beaten, much like himself. Inside, it held the most precious thing he owned, his textbooks. It was a far cry from the shiny leather briefcases carried by the lawyers he admired, but it was enough for him. Every day he would walk to the library, his mind focused, his heart set on becoming a lawyer, to change not just his life, but the lives of others like him. He worked tirelessly. During the day, he was a busboy at a local diner, scrubbing tables and carrying plates. In the evenings, he worked as a janitor in an office building. But the time he cherished most was the time he spent with his books, reading late into the night, learning everything he could about law. The dream was distant, but it was his lifeline. One day, as Elijah was making his way through the crowded streets of New York, his worn briefcase clutched tightly in his hand, he encountered a man who would change the course of his life. The man was well-dressed, tall, and carried himself with an air of superiority that was unmistakable. His name was Nathaniel Gray, a wealthy white businessman who was used to looking down on people like Elijah. Nathaniel noticed Elijah as he walked past, his eyes immediately scanning the ragged clothes, the worn-out shoes, and the old briefcase. The disdain in Nathaniel's eyes was evident. He stopped in his tracks and turned to face Elijah, a mocking smile crossing his lips. "What's this? A janitor trying to play lawyer?" Nathaniel said with a sneer, his voice dripping with condescension. "You don't belong here, boy. People like you don't make it in this world. You're wasting your time. The only thing you'll ever be is a servant. You're destined to clean floors, not to argue in courtrooms." Elijah froze. His heart raced in his chest and his throat tightened. He had heard words like these before, but they still stung. Nathaniel wasn't just mocking his dreams. He was mocking him for being black, for being poor, for trying to rise above the life that society had assigned him. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" Nathaniel continued, stepping closer, his words sharp like daggers. "But you're nothing. Look at you. You're a nobody. You'll never make it." Elijah stood there silent, the sting of the words cutting deep into his soul. His hands trembled, but he didn't let go of his briefcase. Inside it were the books that held his future. They were his treasure. They were his hope. Despite the hurt, Elijah refused to back down. "I may be poor," Elijah said, his voice calm but firm, "but I have dreams, and I'll make them come true no matter what you say." Nathaniel laughed loudly, a cruel laugh that made people around them look in their direction. "Dreams?" he scoffed. "People like you don't get dreams. You stay where you belong. Keep cleaning. Keep serving. You're never going to be anything more than that." The humiliation hit Elijah like a physical blow. But deep down, something shifted in him. He wasn't going to let Nathaniel define him. He wasn't going to let the world or this man tell him what he could and couldn't achieve. As Nathaniel walked away laughing, Elijah wiped the tear that had formed in his eye. His resolve only grew stronger. He would never forget what Nathaniel had said, but he would use it as fuel to keep fighting for his dream. The next few months were a blur of hard work and study. Elijah faced challenges every day: discrimination at work, racial prejudice from strangers, and the constant feeling of being overlooked and undervalued. But he never wavered in his determination. He studied law late into the night, working 2 jobs during the day to make ends meet. His briefcase, though worn, carried the weight of his dreams. Elijah knew that he couldn't rely on anyone to help him. He had to do this on his own. He had no connections, no wealthy family members to support him, no social network to tap into. But what he had was a fierce desire to succeed, and that was more powerful than any obstacle he faced. One evening, as Elijah was walking to the library, he saw a familiar face, a professor who had taught one of his online courses. Her name was Maria, and she was a law professor at a local university. She'd always believed in Elijah, even when he doubted himself. "You're here again, Elijah?" Maria asked, noticing him sitting at a table with his textbooks open. "You don't stop, do you?" Elijah smiled weakly. "I can't. I need to make this work. It's the only way out." Maria nodded. "I've been keeping an eye on your progress. You're doing better than you think. But don't forget to take care of yourself, too. You can't keep pushing yourself like this forever." "I don't have a choice," Elijah said, his eyes intense. "I have to make it." Maria saw the fire in his eyes, and it reminded her of her own struggles when she was younger. She had come from a poor neighborhood herself, and she had fought to rise above the same obstacles Elijah faced now. "If you keep at it," she said, "you'll make it. But you have to trust yourself." Months turned into years, and Elijah's hard work began to pay off. He graduated with honors, his name recognized by professors and classmates alike. The day he walked across the stage to receive his law degree, it felt like the culmination of a lifetime of struggle. His briefcase was no longer ragged. It had been replaced by a new one, a symbol of his success. But Elijah knew that the real test was still ahead of him. He had to prove himself in the real world. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's life had taken a turn for the worse. His business empire, once thriving, had collapsed. Bad investments, poor decisions, and a complete disregard for the people around him had brought him to his knees. The wealth he had flaunted was gone. He had lost everything. Desperate, Nathaniel went to a lawyer for help, hoping to recover some of his assets. He didn't know who would take his case, but he was willing to try anything. And then he learned that the lawyer who could help him was none other than Elijah, the very same man he had once mocked, humiliated, and belittled. When Nathaniel entered Elijah's office, he felt the weight of his own arrogance from years ago. Elijah looked at him without malice, but with a quiet, knowing gaze. The roles had reversed. "You," Nathaniel began, his voice shaky. "You're the lawyer." Elijah nodded, his posture confident, but not arrogant. "I am. How can I help you, Mr. Gray?" The tension in the room was thick, but Elijah stayed calm. He had come a long way from the poor janitor who had been humiliated on the streets. Now he was a man who had earned his place. I don't know how to apologize for what I said to you," Nathaniel continued, his voice heavy with regret. "I treated you like you were nothing, like you didn't deserve to have dreams. But I see now that I was wrong. You proved me wrong." Elijah paused for a moment. He had every right to be angry, to hold a grudge. But he didn't. He had long since learned that forgiveness was more about freeing himself than punishing others. "You were wrong," Elijah said quietly, "but that's not who you are now. What matters is what you do next." Nathaniel looked at Elijah, a man he once believed would never amount to anything, and saw the strength in him. "Can you help me recover my assets?" he asked. Elijah nodded. "I'll help you, but remember, success isn't about wealth. It's about what you do with it and how you treat others along the